that there is power and meaning in nonsense, that nonsense is not equivalent to nothing. For sense is a formal category. Sense is the things that we can fit into a comfortable place. Nonsense is threatening precisely because we don't understand it, because it is truly other, and yet it invites us because it shows us that that otherness lies within us too. So I think that there's a profoundly invading obscurity that we see in these works, where they proliferate out into us and they force us to examine ourselves precisely because as we read, we realize that we are examining some sort of universal pluralization. It doesn't privilege any one form, it privileges sense itself. So that being said, that's it for this lecture. I hope it's been somewhat helpful. You can check out any of my other lectures I've done on postmodernism, German idealism, gender theory, post-colonial studies, and other classic literature. You can also become a channel member for $5 a month and gain access to, among other things, a private philosophy Zoom, which you can tailor to your needs. I also have super thanks if you'd just like to donate to the channel, because books like this are not cheap, especially this one. And I appreciate anything you can give, no question. That's it for this lecture.
Earning a bachelor's degree doesn't have to put your life on hold. Not only does WGU have a generous transfer policy, but you can complete coursework whenever works best for you. Study and take tests on your lunch break, after the kids go to bed, or with your morning coffee. Learn more and get started at wgu.edu. wgu.edu.
Property assessment against an AMC dealership 5 quarters past. Look, I think we can presume you masturbate. Something like 98% of all men masturbate. It's documented. Most of the other 2% are impaired in some way. We can forego the denials. I masturbate, you masturbate. It happens. We all do it, and we all know we all do it, and yet no one ever discusses it. It's an incredibly boring drive. There's nothing to do. We're stuck in this embarrassing car. Let's push the envelope. Let's discuss it. What envelope? Just what do you think of? Think about it. It's a very interior time. It's one of life's only occasions of real self-sufficiency. It requires nothing outside you. It's bringing yourself pleasure with nothing but your own mind's thoughts. Those thoughts reveal a lot about you. What you dream of when you yourself choose and control what you dream. Tits. Tits? You asked me, I'm telling you. That's it? Tits? What do you want me to say? Just tits? In isolation from anybody? Just abstract tits? Alright, fuck off. You mean just floating there? 2 tits in empty space? Or nestled in your hands, or what? Is it always the same tits? This is me learning a lesson. You ask a question like that, and I go, what the hell, and I answer it, and you run a diff 3 on the answer. Tits. So what do you think about then, Mr. Envelope Guy? Subsection 4. From the Peoria Journal-Star, Monday, November 17th, 1980, page C2. IRS worker dead for 4 days. Supervisors at the IRS's regional complex in Lake James Township are trying to determine why no one noticed that one of their employees had been sitting dead at his desk for 4 days before anyone asked if he was feeling all right. Frederick Blomquist, 53, who had been employed as a tax return examiner with the agency for over 30 years, suffered a heart attack in the open plan office he shared with 25 other co-workers at the agency's Regional Examination Center on Self-Storage Parkway. He quietly passed away last Tuesday at his desk, but nobody noticed until late Saturday evening when an office cleaner asked how the examiner could still be working in an office with all the lights off. Mr. Blomquist's supervisor, Scott Thomas, said Frederick was always the first guy in each morning and the last to leave at night. He was very focused and diligent, so no one found it unusual that he was in the same position all that time and didn't say anything. He was always absorbed in his work and kept to himself. A post-mortem examination by the Tazewell County Coroner's Office yesterday revealed that Blomquist had been dead for 4 days after suffering from a coronary. Ironically, according to Thomas, Blomquist was part of a special task force of IRS agents examining the tax affairs of medical partnerships in the area when he died. Subsection 5. It is this boy who dons the bright orange bandolier and shepherds the lower grades kids through the crosswalk outside school. This is after finishing his Meals on Wheels breakfast tour of the charity home for the aged downtown, whose administrator lunges to bolt her office door when she hears his cart's wheels in the hall. He has paid out of pocket for the steel whistle and the white gloves held palm out at cars while children who did not dress themselves cross behind him, some trying to run despite walk, don't run, the happy face sandwich board he also made himself. The autos whose drivers he knows he waves at and gives an extra big smile and tosses some words of good cheer as the crosswalk clears and the cars peel out and barrel through, some joshing around a little by swerving to miss him only by inches as he laughs and dances aside and makes faces of pretended terror at the flank and rear bumper. The time that one station wagon didn't miss him really was an accident, and he sent the lady several notes to make absolutely sure she knew he understood that, and asked a whole lot of people he hadn't yet gotten the opportunity to make friends with to sign his cast, and decorated the crutches very carefully with bits of colored ribbon and tinsel and adhesive sparkles. And even before the minimum 6 weeks the doctor sternly prescribed, he donated the crutches to Calvin Memorial's pediatrics wing in order to brighten up some other less lucky kids' convalescence. And by the end of the whole thing, he'd been inspired to write a very long theme to enter in the annual social studies theme competition about how even a painful and debilitating accidental injury can yield new opportunities for making friends and reaching out to others. And while the theme didn't win or even get honorable mention, he honestly didn't care, because he felt like writing the theme had been its own reward, and that he'd gotten a lot out of the whole 9-draft process, and was honestly happy for the kids whose themes did win prizes, and told them he was 100+% sure they deserved it, and that if they wanted to preserve their prize themes and maybe even make display items out of them for their parents, he'd be happy to type them up and laminate them and even fix any spelling errors he found if they'd like him to. And at home, his father puts his hand on little Leonard's shoulder and says he's proud that his son's such a good sport, and offers to take him to Dairy Queen as a kind of reward. And Leonard tells his father he's grateful, and that the gesture means a lot to him, but that in all honesty, he'd like it even more if they took the money his father would have spent on the ice cream and instead donated it either to Easter seals or, better yet, to UNICEF, to go toward the needs of famine-ravaged Biafran kids who he knew for a fact had probably never even heard of ice cream, and says that he bets it'll end up giving both of them a better feeling even than the DQ would. and as the father slips the coins in the coin slot of the special bright orange UNICEF volunteer cardboard pumpkin bank, Leonard takes a moment to express concern about the father's facial tick again, and to gently give him about his reluctance to go in and have the family's MD look at it, noting again that according to the chart on the back of his bedroom door, the father is 3 months overdue for his annual physical, and that it's almost 8 months past the date of his recommended tetanus and TB boosters. He serves as hall monitor for periods 1 and 2. He's half a grade ahead on credits, but gives far more official warnings than actual citations. He's there to serve, he feels, not run ahead. Usually with the warnings, he dispenses a smile and tells them you're young exactly once, so enjoy it, and to go, get out of here, and make this day count, why don't they? He does UNICEF and Easter seals and starts a recycling program in straight grades. He is healthy and scrubbed and always groomed just well enough to project basic courtesy and respect for the community of which he is a part. And he politely raises his hand in class for every question, but only if he's sure he knows not only the correct answer, but the formulation of that answer that the teacher's looking for that will help advance the discussion of the overall topic they're covering that day, often staying after class to double-check with the teacher that his take on her general objectives is sound, and to ask whether there was any way his in-class answers could have been better or more helpful. The boy's mom has a terrible accident while cleaning the oven and is rushed to the hospital. And even though he's beside himself with concern and says constant prayers for her stabilization and recovery, he volunteers to stay home and field calls and relay information to an alphabetized list of relatives and concerned family friends, and to make sure the mail and newspaper are brought in, and to keep the home's lights turned on and off in a random sequence at night, as Officer Chuck of the Michigan State Police's Crime Stoppers public school outreach program sensibly advises when grown-ups are suddenly called away from home. And also to call the gas company's emergency number, which he has memorized, to have them come check on what may well be a defective valve or circuit in the oven before anyone else in the family is exposed to risk of accidental harm. And also, secretly, to work on an immense display of bunting and pennants and welcome home and world's greatest mom signs, which he plans to use the garage's extendable ladder, with a responsible neighborhood adult holding it and supervising, to very carefully affix to the front of the home with water-soluble glue so that it'll be there to greet and cheer the mom when she's released from critical care with a totally clean bill of health, which Leonard calls his father repeatedly at the critical care ward payphone to assure him that he has absolutely no doubt of the totally clean bill of health, calling hourly right on the dot until there's some kind of mechanical problem with the payphone, and when he dials it, he just gets a high tone, which he duly reports to the telephone company's special 1616 trouble line, remembering to include the specific payphone's 8-digit field product code, which he'd written down all of just in case, as the small print technical material on the 1616 trouble line at the very back of the phone book recommends for most rapid and efficient service. He can produce several different kinds of calligraphy and has been to origami camp twice and can do extraordinary freehand sketches of local flora and can whistle all 6 of Telemann's Nouveau 14 as well as imitate just about any bird call that Audubon could ever have thought of. He sometimes writes academic publishers about possible errors of category and or syntax in their textbooks. Let's not even mention spelling bees. He can make over 20 different kinds of admiral, cowboy, clerical, and multi-ethnic hats out of ordinary newspaper. And he volunteers to visit the school's K-2 classrooms teaching the little kids how, an offer the Carl P. Robinson Elementary principal says he appreciates and has considered very carefully before declining. The principal loathes the mere sight of the boy, but does not quite know why. He sees the boy in his sleep, at nightmare's ragged edges, the pressed checked shirt and hair's hard little part, the freckles and ready, generous smile, anything he can do. The principal fantasizes about sinking a meat hook into Leonard Stessek's bright-eyed little face and dragging the boy face down behind his Volkswagen Beetle over the rough new streets of suburban Grand Rapids. The fantasies come out of nowhere and horrify the principal, who is a devout Mennonite. everyone hates the boy. It is a complex hatred, one that often causes the haters to feel mean and guilty and to hate themselves for feeling this way about such an accomplished and well-meaning boy, which then tends to make them involuntarily hate the boy even more for arousing such self-hatred. The whole thing is totally confusing and upsetting. People take a lot of aspirin when he's around. The boy's only real friends among kids are the damaged, the handicapped, the fat, the last picked, the non grata. He seeks them out. All 316 invitations to his 11th birthday blowout bash, 322 invitations if you count the ones made on audio tape for the blind, are offset printed on quality vellum with matching high-rag envelopes addressed in ornate Philippian II calligraphy he's spent 3 weekends on, and each invitation details in Roman numeraled outline form the itinerary's half-day at Six Flags, private PhD guided tour of the Blandford Nature Center, and reserved banquet area with free play at Shakey's Pizza and indoor arcade on Remembrance Drive. The whole day gratis and paid for out of the paper and aluminum drives the boy got up at 4 a.m. all summer to organize and spearhead. The balance of the drive's receipts going to the Red Cross and the parents of a Kentwood third grader with terminal spina bifida who dreams above all else of seeing the Lions, Night Train Lane, play live from his motorized wheelchair. And the invitations explicitly call the party this: a blowout bash, in balloon-shaped font as the caption to an illustrated explosion of good cheer and will and no-holds-barred let-out all the stops fun, with the bold-faced proviso, please, no presents required, in each of each card's 4 corners. And the 316 invitations sent via first-class mail to every student, instructor, substitute instructor, aide, administrator, and custodian at C.P. Robinson Elementary yield a total attendance of 9 celebrants, not counting parents or LPNs of the incapacitated, and yet an undauntedly fine time was had by all, and such was the consensus on the honest appraisal and suggestion cards, also vellum, circulated at party's end, the massive remainders of chocolate cake, Neapolitan ice cream, pizza, chips, caramel corn, Hershey's Kisses, Red Cross and Officer Chuck pamphlets on organ/tissue donation and the correct procedures to follow if approached by a stranger, respectively, kosher pizza for the Orthodox, designer napkins and dietetic soda in souvenir I Survived Leonard Stessick's 11th birthday blowout bash 1964 plastic glasses with built-in lemniscate crazy straws the guests were to keep as mementos, all donated to the Kent County Children's Home via procedures and transport that the birthday boy had initiated even while the big Twister free-for-all was underway, out of concerns about melted ice cream and staleness and flatness and the waste of a chance to help the less fortunate. And his father, driving the wood panel station wagon and steadying his cheek with one hand, avowed again that the boy beside him had a large, good heart and that he was proud, and that if the boy's mother ever regained consciousness as they so very much hoped, he knew she'd be just awful proud as well. The boy makes A's and just enough occasional B's to keep himself from getting a swelled head about marks, and his teachers shudder at the sound of even just his name. In the 5th grade, he undertakes a district collection to provide a special fund of nickels for anyone at lunch who's already spent their milk money but still might, for whatever reason, want or feel they need more milk. The Jolly Holly Milk Company gets wind of it and puts a squib about the fund and an automated line drawing of the boy on the side of some of their half-pint cartons. 2/3 of the school ceases to drink milk, while the special fund itself grows so large that the principal has to requisition a small safe for his office. The principal is now taking Seconal to sleep and experiencing fine tremors, and on 2 separate occasions is cited for failure to yield at marked crosswalks. A teacher, in whose homeroom the boy suggests a charted reorganization of the coat hooks and boot boxes lining one wall, so that the coat and galoshes of the student whose desk is nearest the door would themselves be nearest the door, and the second nearest's second nearest, and so on, speeding the pupil's egress to recess and reducing delays and possible quarrels and clots of half-bundled kids at the classroom door, which delays and clots the boy had taken the trouble this quarter to chart by statistical incidents with relevant graphics and arrows, but all names withheld. This tenured and highly respected veteran teacher ends up brandishing blunt scissors and threatening to kill both the boy and then herself, and is put on medical leave, during which she receives thrice-weekly get-well cards with neatly typed summaries of the class's activities and progress in her absence, sprinkled with glitter and folded in perfect diamond shells that open with just a squeeze, 2 long facets inside, i.e. inside the cards, until the teacher's doctors order her mail to be withheld until improvement or at least stabilization in her condition warrants. Right before 1965's big Halloween UNICEF collection, 3 6th graders accost the boy in the southeast restroom after 4th period and do unspeakable things to him, leaving him hanging from a stall's hook by his underpants elastic. And after being treated and released from the hospital, a different one than his mother was a patient in the long-term convalescent ward of, the boy refuses to identify his assailants and later, circumspectly, delivers to them individualized notes detailing his renunciation of any and all hard feelings about the incident, apologizing for whatever unwitting offense he might have given to provoke it, exhorting his attackers to please put the whole thing behind them and not in any way self-recriminate over it, especially down the line, because the boy's understanding was that these were the sorts of things that could sometimes really haunt you later on down the line in adulthood, citing 1 or 2 journal articles the attackers might have a look at if they wanted documentation on the long-term psychological effects of self-recrimination, and, in the notes, professing his personal hope that an accurate friendship might conceivably result in the whole regrettable incident. Along which lines, he was also enclosing an invitation to attend a short, no-questions-asked, conflict resolution roundtable the boy has persuaded a local community services outreach organization to sponsor after school the following Tuesday. Light refreshments served, after which the boy's PE locker, along with the 4 on either side, are destroyed in an act of pyrotechnic vandalism that everyone on both sides in the subsequent court trial agreed got totally out of hand, and was not a premeditated attempt to injure the night custodian or to do anything like the amount of structural damage to the boys' locker room it ended up doing, and at which trial Leonard Stesic appeals repeatedly to both sides' counsel for the opportunity to testify for the defense, if only as a character witness. A large percentage of the boy's classmates hide, take actual evasive action when they see him coming. Eventually, even the marginal and infirm stop returning his calls. His mother has to be turned and her limbs manipulated twice a day. Subsection 6. They were up on a picnic table at that one park by the lake, by the edge of the lake with part of a downed tree in the shallows half hidden by the bank. Lane A. Dean Jr. and his girlfriend, both in blue jeans and button-up shirts. They sat up on the table's top portion and had their shoes on the bench part that people sat on and picnicked in carefree times. They had gone to different high schools, but the same junior college where they had met in campus ministries. It was springtime. The park's grass was very green, and the air suffused with honeysuckle and lilacs both, which was almost too much. There were bees, and the angle of the sun made the water of the shallows look dark. There had been more storms that week, with some downed trees and the sound of chainsaws all up and down his parents' street. Their postures on the picnic table were both the same forward kind, with their shoulders rounded and elbows on their knees. In this position, the girl rocked slightly and once put her face in her hands, but she was not crying. Lane was very still and immobile, and looking past the bank at the downed tree in the shallows and its wall of exposed roots going all directions, and the tree's cloud of branches all half in the water. The only other individual nearby was a dozen spaced tables away by himself, standing upright, looking at the torn-up hole in the ground there where the tree had gone over. It was still early yet, and all the shadows wheeling right and shortening. The girl wore a thin, old checked cotton shirt with pearl-colored snaps with the long sleeves down, and she always smelled very good and clean, like someone you could trust and deeply care about even if you weren't in love. Lane Dean had liked the smell of her right away. His mother called her down to earth and liked her, thought she was good people. You could tell. She made this evident in little ways. The shallows lapped from different directions at the tree as if almost teething on it. Sometimes when alone and thinking or struggling to turn a matter over to Jesus Christ in prayer, he would find himself putting his fist in his palm and turning it slightly, as if still playing and pounding his glove to stay sharp and alert in center. He did not do this now. It would be cruel and indecent to do this now. The older individual stood beside his picnic table. He was at it, but not sitting, and looked also out of place in a suit coat or jacket and the kind of older men's hat Lane's grandfather wore in photos as a young insurance man. He appeared to be looking across the lake. If he moved, Lane didn't see it. He looked more like a picture than a man. There were not any ducks in view. One thing Lane Dean did was reassure her again that he'd go with her and be there with her. It was one of the few safe or decent things he could really say. The second time he said it again now, she shook her head and laughed in an unhappy way that was more just air out her nose. Her real laugh was different. Where he'd be was the waiting room, she said. That he'd be thinking about her and feeling bad for her, she knew, but he couldn't be in there with her. This was so obviously true, he felt like a ninny that had kept on him. He now knew what she had thought every time he went and said it. It hadn't brought her comfort or eased the burden at all. The worse he felt, the stiller he sat. The whole thing felt balanced on a knife or wire. If he moved to put his arm up or touch her, the whole thing could tip over. He hated himself for sitting so frozen. He could almost visualize himself tiptoeing through something explosive, a big, stupid-looking tiptoe like in a cartoon. The whole last black week had been this way, and it was wrong. He knew it was wrong. He knew something was required of him, and knew it was not this terrible frozen care and caution, but he pretended to himself he did not know what it was that was required. He pretended it had no name. He pretended that not saying aloud what he knew to be right and true was for her sake, was for the sake of her needs and feelings. He also worked dock and routing at UPS besides school, but traded to get the day off after they decided together. 2 days before, he had awakened very early and tried to pray, but could not. He was freezing more and more solid, he felt like, but he hadn't thought of his father or the blank frozenness of his father, even in church, that once had filled him with such pity. This was the truth. Lane Dean Jr. felt sun on one arm as he pictured in his mind an image of himself on a train, waving mechanically to something that got smaller and smaller as the train pulled away. His father and his mother's father had the same birthday, a cancer. Sherry's hair was colored an almost corn blonde, very clean, the skin through the central part pink in the part in the light. They'd sat up here long enough that only their right side was shaded now. He could look at her head, but not at her. Different parts of him felt unconnected to each other. She was smarter than him, and they both knew it. It wasn't just school. Lane Dean was in accounting and business and did all right. He was hanging in there. She was a year older. She was 20, but it was also more. She had always seemed to Lane to be on good terms with her life in a way age could not account for. His mother had put it that she knew what it is she wanted, which was nursing and not an easy program at Peoria Junior College, and plus, she worked hostessing at the Embers and had bought her own car. She was serious in a way Lane liked. She had a cousin that died when she was 13 or 14 that she loved and been close with. She only talked about it that once. He liked her smell and down the hair on her arms and the way she explained when something made her laugh. He had liked just being with her and talking to her. She was serious in her faith and values in a way that Lane had liked, and now, sitting with her on the table, found himself afraid of. This was an awful thing. He was starting to believe he might not be serious in his faith. He might be somewhat of a hypocrite, like the Assyrians in Isaiah, which would be a far graver sin than the appointment. He had decided he believed this. He was desperate to be good people, to still be able to feel he was good. He rarely before had thought of damnation and hell. That part of it didn't speak to his spirit. And in worship services, he more just tuned himself out and tolerated hell when it came up, the same way you tolerate the job you've got to have to save up for what it is you want. Her tennis shoes had little things and items doodled on them from sitting in her class lectures. She stayed looking down like that. Little notes or reading assignments in Bic in her neat, round hand on the rubber elements around the sneaker's rim. Lane A. Dean looking at her inclined heads, sides, barrettes in the shape of blue ladybugs. The appointment was for afternoon. But when the doorbell rang so early and his mother had called to him up the stairs, he had known, and a terrible kind of blankness had commenced falling through him. He told her that he did not know what to do, that he knew if he was the salesman of it and forced it upon her, that was awful and wrong. But he was trying to understand. They prayed on it and talked it through from every different angle. Lane said how sorry she knew he was, and that if he was wrong in believing they truly decided together when they decided to make the appointment, she should please tell him, because he thought he knew how she must have felt as it got closer and closer, and how she must be so scared, but that what he couldn't tell was if it was more than that. He was totally still, except for moving his mouth, it felt like. She did not reply. That if they needed to pray on it more and talk it through, why then he was here. He was ready, he said. He said the appointment could get moved back. If she just said the word, they could call and push it back to take more time to be sure in the decision. It was still so early in it. They both knew that, he said. This was true. He felt this way. And yet he also knew he was also trying to say things that would get her to open up and say enough back that he could see her and read her heart and know what to say to get her to go through with it. He knew this without admitting to himself that this is what he wanted, for it would make him a hypocrite and a liar. He knew, in some locked-up little part of him, why it was that he'd gone to no one to open up and seek their life counsel. Not Pastor Steve or the prayer partners at Campus Ministries, not his UPS friends, or the spiritual counseling available through his parents' old church. But he did not know why Sherry herself had not gone to Pastor Steve. He could not read her heart. She was blank and hidden. He so fervently wished it never happened. He felt like he knew now why it was a true sin and not just a leftover rule from past society. He felt like he had been brought low by it and humbled, and now did understand and believe that the rules were there for a reason, that the rules were concerned with him personally, as an individual. He'd promised God he had learned his lesson. But what if that too was a hollow promise from a hypocrite who repented only after, who promised submission but really only wanted a reprieve? He might not even know his own heart or be able to read and know himself. He kept thinking also of 1 Timothy 6 and the hypocrite therein who disputeth over words. He felt a terrible inner resistance.